thank you all for being here. This is really, really interesting just to absorb all of these new bits of sort of overlapping information. And I think I will kind of pick up on something that Devra was talking about, which I didn't talk about this morning very much, which is this idea that we assume things are safe until proven otherwise, new technologies, new materials, these amazing things people have been making in the laboratory that are going to be stretchy, waterproof surfaces, they're going to repel stains, they're going to do all these amazing things. And one of the really, really impressive things I learned while I was working on Chasing Molecules was in the green chemistry realm. And I learned this from John Warner, who's considered one of the founders of green chemistry, is that to this day, and it's slowly starting to change, but almost anywhere in this country, if you are getting a college degree, undergraduate degree, a master's degree, or a Ph.D. in chemistry, and you are going to go on to have a career as a synthetic chemist, somebody making new chemicals that are going to go into making products and new materials and technologies, you do not ever have to take a course in toxicology or any kind of environmental health science so that you would have any training or any awareness that your material might have an effect on human health and the environment. And not very long ago, I was working on a story about the efforts that are being made in the aerospace and defense industries to move away from a really toxic products that are made with hexavalent chromium, which is a very well-known carcinogen. But it turns out it's a really useful anti-corrosion material that goes into all sorts of coating materials that go on aircraft and military vessels, things that have to be in really extreme, varied environments, whether it's the Arctic or the tropics, all of the above, exposed to ocean salts. And so they've been relying on this really toxic chemical in these metal combinations. And I was talking to one scientist, and happily for him, I've forgotten exactly what his name is actually now. I just remembered it. I won't tell you right now. But they were working with these novel materials based on rare earths, which I'm sure some of you have been hearing about. And it was looking pretty promising that they were starting to commercialize some of these in these paints and coatings as alternatives to the hexavalent chromium. And so I asked him if they were looking into the environmental health effects of these new materials they were making so that they would not repeat a scenario of finding out that they had something that was really, really useful but that turned out to be horribly toxic. And he said, no, we don't do that. Somebody else does that. The medical guys do that. The toxicologists do that. And I can't really, I'm not being an advocate. I'm being a journalist, so I can't say, oh, my God, on the telephone. But I just thought, oh, my gosh, every time I think we've made some leap forward, there are these great divides. So one of the things that I'm kind of interested in here is the fact that you have people who are either studying or working in or advocating in very traditionally might be very sort of separate disciplines, or this talk this morning where somebody mentioned, oh, we don't do nutrition in medical school. The fact that these things are considered separate really have to come together if we're going to solve these problems. And I'm working on a story now where I had editors say to me, we don't want you to talk about occupational health. We want you to talk about environmental health. And again, I'm sort of going, oh my gosh, you can't, this is an environment. This is the workplace environment. This is the community environment for the people in this industry. So I think this idea that we've been keeping these disciplines separate is part of what Devra was talking about assuming things are safe because you haven't kind of looked around the corner to ask a question about the other effects of your new creation. And in chemistry, in synthetic chemistry, the goal was always to make something that performed in a certain way, and that performance was sort of the top priority. And then after that, could you make it quickly and efficiently and cheaply? Could you keep the cost down? no one ever looked at the health effects. That was always something that was done afterwards, and that is still happening today. And that's one of the big changes that green chemistry advocates are trying to make, is to start at the very beginning designing something that is safe. And the fact is that there's a huge amount of research going on now to enable scientists to very quickly compare chemical structures so we don't repeat the mistakes that have been made for years and years designing new chemicals that, guess what, those brominated flame retardants look just like the PCBs, and if you take a look at that molecule and look at something like an estrogen hormone, oh my gosh, they have very similar structures too. So I'm not a chemist, but I can look at these pictures and I can see, oh my gosh, these things all look very similar. So it shouldn't be any surprise that they are going to be able to interact and interfere with each other and perhaps behave in similar ways. So the idea of putting these disciplines together so that people can ask really informed questions, whether it's about GMOs, a new technology, electronics technology, and not assume that somebody else will answer that question, and then because you can't go backwards and sort of take these things out of the equation. Now it'd be much better to fix it from the outset. So I may be yielding a minute of my time to the gentleman from Iowa, but I think that's kind of what I want to stop with now.